Welcome back to the Corporate Governance Program. I'm Amir Qureshi. Zibur, my next question is about the use of independent directors. Now, do you have independent directors on your board?
Yes, we do. And we feel it's extremely important that every director, as an independent director, and part of their fiduciary duty, they discharge towards both the board and towards the management and the rest of the stakeholders, be it customers, be it employees, be it our suppliers, bankers, creditors, environment as a stakeholder, that they play their independent roles there. And as I said before, we do have the right structure in place globally now. And in Pakistan, of course, although we have a minority shareholder in Pakistan who has seats on the board, they definitely conform to much of those requirements, which clearly is a benefit for Ericsson globally.
And one of the points you made earlier on was the fact that Ericsson is having to follow the Sarbanes-Oxley model, but Ericsson obviously is a European company. How can you explain the background to why you actually have to comply with Sarbanes-Oxley?
Yeah, actually, any company, irrespective of its country of origin or where it's incorporated, still has to follow and comply to Sarbanes-Oxley Act post, of course, 2002, since they're listed on any of the exchanges in the U.S.
Okay,
so we are listed on NASDAQ, and that makes it a requirement for us.
So indirectly you're caught up with Sarbanes-Oxley.
Absolutely.
Sarah, one of my questions that I'd like to ask you is about succession planning in family-owned businesses. We've talked about good governance, etc. If you have good governance practices in place, will that make succession planning easier in a family-owned business, do you think?
Well, yes, I definitely think so, because there has to be, I think, at a certain point in time when a family business grows to a certain extent, there should be separation of ownership and management. In Pakistan, what tends to happen is in family businesses, a lot of family members play management roles. And when you talk about succession in family businesses, at the end of the day, you do have a group board or a company board which has to be chaired. And so normally the creator of the business in this generation is the chairman of the board. And so, that position has to be succeeded by a child in a future generation. And so, if succession planning is not done carefully and not done at a young age, meaning in Pakistan, how often do you see young children, going into their family businesses from the age of 12 or 13, getting training from a very young age, getting groomed. And if that doesn't happen, and if the creator of the business doesn't clearly define who will be the successor, or what are the systems through which succession will take place. If you have good governance practices, then you would already have a strategy for succession at the board level. And if you don't, then perhaps it's something that will happen once you incorporate good corporate governance practices. So succession is not even a choice. I mean, it has to be given the greatest of importance, and it's a matter that is urgent, because if you don't plan for succession, once again your business can disintegrate, and it can really, really affect family harmony.
Yes, and Pakistan is going through, I suppose, a generational change. We're 60 years old now, and the new generation is coming in. So more attention needs to be paid to that.
And I think that just another point I would like to add, I mean, there are so many global statistics of how many family businesses disintegrate in the second and the third generation, simply because they haven't planned for the future. And so, that is critical. And I think, another point I would like to say is that, bringing in good corporate governance is, I feel, the responsibility of our generation, of my generation, because it is not something that was, very much given, the way that corporate governance is given due attention today. It was not like this maybe 40, 50 years ago.
Yes, things have changed.
So we have to, our generation, people of my age who are working in their family businesses need to be that change maker.
And Professor Haroon, you were talking previously about, I suppose, the need to take into account the cultural context as far as any laws that are brought into Pakistan. There are lots of models of corporate governance around the world. The Anglo-Saxon model is one, the European model is the other one, Japanese have their own approach. Why do you think Pakistan is following, I suppose, the traditional Anglo-Saxon model, as opposed to either creating our own or learning from some of these other models, like the Japanese model, for example?
As a starting point, the IFC model per se is pretty good. But then as you go along, you bring into the flavor of our local Pakistani uniqueness in the way that we do business here. For example, one of the areas that needs concern is protection of minority shareholders' rights, for example. We have certain laws that are there. Maybe some enforcement is lacking in certain areas. But nevertheless, there's a certain amount of work that can be done in those areas. For example, if you look at the Code of Corporate Governance and the Companies Ordinance 1984, that does not, both of these don't recognize the minority shareholders. And minority shareholders have, for example, if they need any redressal of their grievance, then they have to have at least 10% shareholding together to request or lodge a complaint with the SECP for appointment of an inspector to investigate the affairs of a company. Now, such shareholders, they can go to the court of law, and but they still have to have enough support of about 20% shareholding of shareholders in order to file a civil suit.
And so the issue is, I think, what you're trying to say, I suppose, is given the concentration of shareholding in certain people's hand, getting 20% in a practical sense would be very difficult.
And there's a way out. There's a possible way out, and that is to sort of have an internal grievance and redressal committee within the company. And you can maybe have a committee or a department just exclusively for that purpose. What we need actually is legal advice. Maybe the role of the audit committee can be expanded and includes, and that may include a legal advisor.
Yes.
But all of this can help, and maybe the frontline regulators, maybe the one of the stock exchanges, can sort of act as an appellate body. And then if that is no decision can be reached there, then of course then the SECP can come in. So this what this does is it creates a quasi-judicial setup.
Yes.
And at different forums, redressal of complaints can be accomplished.
Okay, Professor Haroon, we just need to take another short break, but we'll be back with more of the Corporate Governance Program.